done a lot of hunting online for what others have to say about God's justice in relative terms. I mean, there's the textbooks, R.C. Sproul, guys like that are out there that will quote in deep, billowing, puffy clouds, God's justice. And you listen to it, you read it, you sit back and say, okay, that's scary. How does it apply to my life? And how does it solve that problem over there? And it doesn't, because they've made it so ambiguous, so big, so wonderful, so theological. And us mere lowly adults sit back and say, I don't know what to do with that. I found a really neat outline by a Chinese pastor, Pastor Chung, and I borrowed his outline, but I tweaked it with some observations. The world that we live in is becoming more scary all the time. It almost seems like a Steve Martin routine. You know Steve Martin? There was an anniversary this week at King Tut, and I was watching, and of course we couldn't do the video because we don't have video, but there's the Steve Martin song, Why I'm an Egyptian. He comes out on the stage, the Saturday Night Live skit, and it was hilarious. But the world seems to be tilted on edge. And everyone's like falling off the world. It used to be we would be able to identify with absolutes, where there were anchors, where there was, you could point to mile markers in your life, in the world around you, where there were these stone markers. You could lean on them and they wouldn't fall. You could feel your way through the darkness. You felt like there were barriers and parameters, and all of a sudden, everywhere you look, you want to have this gentle conversation in an intolerant world and ask people, why do you believe that? And why do you think that way? And all they do is yell at you for being a bigot because you asked a question. You know, and it's hard for me because I have always been, in my entire 30 years in ministry, that guy in the middle section, 6 rows back, 7 seats in, that when the guy is talking something weird, I go, excuse me? Could you explain that? I've always been that guy, and it always gets me in trouble. But that's the world we live in. Okay. He's now not kicking the ball against the window, he's kicking the window. Awkward. Okay. So let's break it down. What are these questions that we interact with? The one question the world asks you is that, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to anybody? Think of it in these terms. When an innocent life is taken in an unjust manner, what can we offer to people to console the hurt? This week there was an 8-year-old girl who was playing in her front yard in Camden, New Jersey. And a teenage boy was playing with a gun across the street and he shot her. What answers do you have to that mom? Either mom. When a building's under renovations, like the Hoagie World building that fell, and I don't know if you're following the story, but a contractor went to jail for 30 years because he wasn't a licensed contractor, and everybody's doing the finger pointing, and they were tearing down this building, and somebody who should have known better left up a 4-story brick wall, and it fell on the Salvation Army and killed like 13 people. Absolutely flattened the building. Weren't those people in that building doing God's work? They worked for the Salvation Army. Where was God in all that? Why did God protect them? You know, I mean, we're looking for justice. You know, the question of everyone seems to be, well, do we have an unjust world? Well, do we have an unjust God? Third one. As I shared during my prayer time, my sister had an aneurysm. It's a family issue. It's a family trait. And you sit back, and I've sat back and said, okay, God, my aunt, my mom died of an aneurysm. 3 of her sisters died of an aneurysm. Uncle Paul died of an aneurysm. My mom's mom died of an aneurysm. Now my sister has an aneurysm. At what point in time are you going to fix this? You know, you sit back and you ask questions about God. What about? You know, it's personal. Well, we struggle with these questions, and here's the only conclusion you can come to: life's not fair. There's a Bible verse: the rain falls on the just and the unjust. Our gut tells us it should be fair, and we're disappointed when it isn't, especially when we're on the receiving end. Those who don't believe in God are stuck with their feelings, and they have no resolution. Those of us who do believe in God can face difficulty because we believe God is just. That's where we're going to spend our time. How do we resolve these things? Even when we experience years of God's goodness and faithfulness, one raw deal in our life can sour us forever. I've seen people in my, I've been a Christian now 39 years, and I've seen people who I've served God with, that I've seen God move in their lives. I've seen God do miraculous healing. I've seen God do some amazing things. And one bad church experience, one bad pastor, one horrible situation, and they have walked away and denied that he ever existed. You see, we struggle because we have yet to fully understand God. We just don't know him enough. And today I want us to learn about this attribute of God's justice. Turn with me, if you would, to the very first book in the Bible, Genesis, chapter 18. It's an interesting passage. Let's start in verse 22 and read to 33. 18. Oh, my bookmark was actually on 18. I want you to hear. We're going to break into this conversation. The Trinity visits Abraham. I think it's really cool that they sat under the tree and they hung out all day and they were patient and they baked bread and they roasted a calf and brought milk and dairy products and they sat down and they ate and they hung out and they talked. I want you to hear that because while you're having this conversation on your own with God, and by the way, we all need to have this conversation with God. He cares about you that much that he's going to hang with you and speak with you and get to know you and let you get to know him. So verse 22. So these men, the Trinity, turned up from there and went to Sodom. But Abraham stood before the Lord. By the way, the Lord hung back and the other two members of the Trinity start wandering towards Sodom. And then Abraham drew near and said, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Supposedly, there's 50 righteous in the city. Will you sweep away that place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked? Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sin. Abraham answered and said, behold, I understand to speak to the Lord. Who am I but dust and ashes? Suppose there are 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for those 5? And he said, I will not destroy if I find 45 there. And again he spoke to him, suppose 40 are found there. And he answered, for the sake of the 40, I will not do it. And then he said, oh, let the Lord not be angry, I will speak. Suppose only 30 be found there. And he answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there. Behold, I understand to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. And he answered, for the sake of 20, I will not destroy it. Then he said, oh, let the Lord not be angry. I will speak again, but this once. Suppose there are only 10 found there. And he answered, for the sake of the 10, I will not destroy it. And the Lord went his way. And when he had finished speaking to Abraham, Abraham returned to his place.
The definition of justice is the fact that the Lord did not with Abraham.
The Lord ate his food and listened to his talk. By the way, there's that same parallel over in the book of Job, and Job was even more persnickety with God. And there's instances in the Psalms, Psalm 90, for example, where David is having an R-rated conversation with God and getting God's crawl about stuff. And God didn't go beam off Mars with him either. You know, there's a thing about grace and justice, and you see how gracious the Lord is. God saw the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he was prepared to judge them. Abraham pleaded with him. Remember that this is centuries before the Ten Commandments. This wasn't written down yet. We didn't have, I was going to look up the Bible by my iPad, you know? Abraham, the father of faith, living in a polytheistic world, very similar to us, having no written scriptures, instinctively knows something about the character of God. God will not judge the earth. God will judge all of the earth and not judge righteously, he asked. By faith, Abraham knew God's character enough to know that, here it is, there is a standard. He is the standard. That's the big thing I want you to walk away with. I want you to be able to take this thing, that there is a standard, there is an absolute, when the world goes mad. And by the way, this whole series is about, what do we do in a world that's going mad? What do we do with that? Well, the fact is that we have to realize that there is an anchor point. There is a standard. There is God and his character, and he is just. So, we're called to have faith in a just God. Faith, not with the lens of the experience or changing circumstances. The world's going to change. The surroundings of us are going to change. Our personal lives are going to change. Stuff happens. God doesn't change. You cannot interpret God through the sights and sounds of a fallen world that we live in. You cannot look at what you see on TV. You cannot see, and I'm telling you, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I have read enough to know that there are professional protesters out there that go around and being paid to stir up trouble. Why else would perfectly, okay, I know there are horrific circumstances, and I'm not belittling the fact that someone got shot unjustly, okay? But even that being said, why would people go and burn down their own community over that issue? Why? You would think they would go burn down somebody else's community. You would think in Baltimore they wouldn't burn down their own street, the only pharmacy in town, the only good pizza and Chinese joint in town, burn them to the ground. You would figure they would get on the bus with their kerosene, go across town to some white neighborhood and torch, Neiman Marcus, I mean, you would figure that if they're going to do damage, they would do it when they really send a physical message. You would think. But you have to sit back and say, okay, in light of what we see and what we hear and the outrage, the pain and the anger, it doesn't change the fact that God is just. The fact is, we do have an answer. We do have a source. I'll read this to you. This was profound. God is just, not because he obeys a standard. He himself is the standard. When we say justice needs to be served, we are basing it upon the laws of our country. We are referring to a legal system which we live under and must abide by. We must follow the rules of law. And the lawyers in courtrooms try to debate over the technicalities and argue over the legal terms to try to beat and avoid them. God isn't accountable to any of the law. He is the law. Justice flows from him, and that's who he is. You see, he's not just trying to follow a standard, he is the standard. We have nothing to fear. By faith, Abraham believed that God was just. And on that basis, he pleaded with him, and that's the premise we start with. Abraham interceded for Lot, his nephew, and his family. He knew that there were 10 of them. God accepted his request that if 10 men could be still found in those cities, he'd spare them. Abraham understood that there was a character of justness with God the Father. And he was able to plead his case and reason with him and speak to him according to what the standard was. You see, we believe that there's a God in this unjust world. We believe there's a good God, and it's a sinful world. In Psalm 97, it says, clouds and thick darkness surround him. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. A picture like that, these words, how can the throne collapse? God cannot be understood apart from his justice. There is no thing as an unrighteous God or an unjust God. And this is the thing that you have to come to grasp with. And I am a proponent of serving people. I serve people not because I'm trying to work my way to heaven. I'm serving people because I know I'm going to heaven, and I know there are answers, and I know they have needs, and I know that those needs that they have in their lives are obstacles, and unless we go there and meet those needs in a physical manner, and showing his love, and showing the fact that we are united together to do that, how could they ever believe that we believe what we believe? You see, there is no justice without God's justice. We can feed the hungry, we can serve the poor, we can help a man turn his life around, we can see someone turn their life around from heroin, but the simple matter of fact is it all falls short unless we have introduced them to the God of justice, who is Christ. Now there's two elements of this that we're going to have to embrace. Here's the second point. We're going to wait for the Lord. Turn to Luke 18. Some powerful stuff this morning. Luke 18, verses 1 through 8. Jesus told his disciples in a parable to show them they would always pray and not give up. And here's the thing. When you have to wait upon the Lord, you see, this comes back to justice. We have to point to the fact that there is a standard. There is a source. There is a pillar that we can build our crummy little lives around that are falling apart. But there's also the patience that come with that, because change doesn't happen overnight. Jesus said this, they should always pray and not give up. He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God or cared about men. And then there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with a plea, grant me justice against my adversary. For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, even though I don't fear God or care about men, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually wear me out over her coming. And the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones, who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find any faith on earth? You know, when I founded this church with some of you, what drove us was we kept reading the book of Acts and looking at the simplistic plan that God had for a faith community. And we kept asking ourselves, why not? It's taken us 10 years, 10 years to get to the place where we finally have a core that we can build around. Because we've sifted through all these people who wanted what they wanted, but they didn't want what God wanted. They didn't want the simplistic truth of what God taught. They wanted whatever. In other words, between injustice now and the justice of God that he will bring forth then, there's going to be a period that I must trust in the Lord. Boy, is that hard. You know, I shared this last week, and I'm going to share it again. Some of the prayers that I had answered 2 weeks ago were prayers that my wife and I had prayed for over a decade. Do you hear that? When you guys as a family went through your health concerns, was there a flip of the switch in the answer? You both gone through health issues. There was that agonizing period where there's incubation, where you were on. I remember Tim Pierce. Tim had that accident when he was working in Baltimore, and he had a head injury, and he had these concussion symptoms that lasted for 8 or 9 years. And I remember he couldn't work. He was struggling, and he just kept going to church and sitting there all day long on a pew, just praying and begging and crying and ask God, heal me, heal me. And by the way, God, heal me. You know? Psalm 27 says in verse 11 through 14, now listen to this. Teach me your way, O Lord. Lead me in the straight path because of my oppressors. Do not turn me over to the desire of my foes, for false witnesses rise up against me, breathing out violence. I am still confident of this, that I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. For wait upon the Lord, be strong, take it to heart, wait for the Lord. It is hard waiting for God. I'll tell you something. Some of the blessings that I've experienced recently are blessings that I prayed for, as I said, for a decade. You would think you'd be doing cartwheels and handstands and just, I'm not. I'm more sober than I've ever been. I mean, from a serious nature, I look at what God has done, and I'm looking now through the filter of the brokenness of my life and the humbleness that God has brought me to. Where, yeah, I'm still this brash, noisy mouthpiece, but I'm a reserved, brash, noisy mouthpiece. You know, it's like I've met God, I've experienced God, and I've also experienced the life that comes with someone who says, I want to follow God. I look at, I read the book of Joel. Although, I've read through the entire Minor Prophets 5 times in the last 5 years. Because I realize that I'm a minor prophet. I'm as a pastor, as a missionary, I look at the lives. All these guys were like, they were treated as crazy people because they saw the reality, and they kept telling everybody what the reality was, and everybody else sat back and said, it's okay, que sera, sera, we got what we want, we're happy. And you sit back and you feel like you're going to go mad because you realize that there is a hell, there is eternity, it is real, and there are consequences to sin, and you want to tell people the truth, but they don't want to hear the truth, and they burp it up all over you, and they're saying, I don't want what you want. I want what I have. I want what he has. Matter of fact, I want what he has and what she has down there. Because we have such a greedy, personal-driven lifestyle in America, We don't understand what enough is. You see, by learning to wait, you learn how to be sustained in the process. You learn how to hold on to God. You learn how to go back and say, there is this pillar here, and there's this pillar here, and there's this pillar there. I can build my life upon those pillars and hang on, and because I know God will provide, because he met this need here, he met that need here, and he's going to meet those needs there. And you sit back and you start getting comfortable in the fact of waiting, and you start getting humbled by waiting, and you start sitting back saying, it's okay, God. If it doesn't happen, it's okay, because I've learned to sustain myself in you. 2 Peter says this in chapter 3. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promises, as some understand slowness. He is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. You see, delaying judgment is not injustice, it's the mercy of God. The big picture, God makes all things right. Whether it is an immediate or delayed judgment, we have it in the wisdom of God of who he is. Which leads me to the third point, and I won't keep you long. You can't take vengeance. You see a parallel of an answer here that we can give to the world that's going mad? You see, they have no absolutes. And because they have no absolutes, they're running amok in absolute anarchy. They have no patience. You sit back and say, well, okay, let's look at the Black Lives Matter. We've been waiting for 300 years. Well, aren't we all waiting 300 years? I mean, my people, we came over, we were so enslaved to the DuPont company that when they built the factory walls, they built them 6 feet thick of stone on 3 sides and plywood on this one side. So when one of us stupid Irishmen screwed up, we blew ourselves out into the Brandywine River and made it for easy cleanup and rebuild. You know, it was so, do you understand, the Irish were so mistreated that in Delaware they recently found a cemetery that the Catholics forgot about that had 4,000 graves that they had sold for development years ago. Listen, we're all waiting for something. Hear that? No matter what your culture is, no matter what color you are, what gender you are, we're all waiting for something. We all have a hurt. We all have a pain. There is a standard. We really need to be patient in this and let God work it out and bring justice into our lives. And the third thing is, we don't have the right to go seek vengeance over it. My problem with Black Lives Matter, and I will say this publicly, is that I hear more vengeance than I hear people asking for justice. Hence, burn your own city down. It's not going to be popular, but it's true. You see, God's justice isn't relevant for the world gone mad. Help if I went to the right page. I apologize. This one thing we must keep sharing with the world. God is ultimately in control. His justice will prevail. It's hard to hear it when you're hurting. You see, if more leaders stand up and say, listen, you're going to get justice. God will deliver you, but it's on his terms. You don't have the right to go seek vengeance. Romans 12:19. Listen to this. Romans 12:19. Do not take vengeance, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. You're not allowed to live with bitterness and unresolved anger towards people who have wronged you. That keeps you in bondage. That binds you to all the hurt and pain. God has promised to balance the scales. He will take care of everything in due course. If not here, then one day before his throne. You have to look at things in an eternal perspective. For most of us, we might not take justice or vengeance, but we think vengeance. Think now for a second. Okay? Think now for a second. You wish that that person would trip and fall. You wish they would get flushed down the drain. Demoted, transferred out, sacked, thrown out of school, whatever. At the same time, you're hurting yourself, not the other person who's wasting your time. And here's the thing. We have to let things go. You want your heart to be filled with peace and joy and not bitterness and anger? Let God settle the score in His time. He will take care of the situation fully and completely. One day when I was a youth pastor up here, we had a basketball court. I learned a lot by putting in a hoop. I learned a lot by taking it out. I lost a youth worker over it, but I gained a neighbor. Because it seems like that we put a hoop in, we put a light out there that were only on during certain hours, and we circulated a notice that you're welcome to use the hoop if you're respectful, but only certain hours of the day. Well, you have hoop, people show up. People who don't live in the neighborhood, who aren't respectful. Well, one day I had a pickup game going out there with a bunch of kids. And the kids were rowdy, and like most teenagers who live in this neighborhood, no matter whether they're wealthy or not, because we do live in Delco proper, every fifth word is the F-bomb. And it is. Every third sentence is really off color. It is. My neighbor, and as I'm yelling at these kids for cleaning up their language, my neighbor behind me, who I didn't know was there, yells out, "Charlie! You can't save them all." That still befuddles me 10 years, 15 years later. That blows me away. Insight from a neighbor who doesn't go to church. It's powerful. You see, we have to give certain things to God. You want to see your kids love Christ and serve Christ? At some point in time, you're going to have to give your kids to God. And say, okay, God, I know I screwed up here. By the way, I was a horrible dad. I'm a workaholic. I publicly admit it. I can tell you what not to do in being a good dad. I mean, I can tell you what to do to be a good dad because I know my own personal mistakes. But two things I do know that have helped my kids turn out. Number one, I told them every single day that they mattered and I loved them. The second thing was, I was consistent. Sometimes consistently bad, but I was consistent. And consistency breeds security. Security breeds a hope and a longing for truth. You see, we cannot right every wrong. We can't change everything. There are going to be things in your life that you will never change in this entire lifetime. Deal with it. All of it. It's in Scripture. There are going to be idiosyncrasies about your life that make you uniquely you in annoying ways that you're not going to change. And it's okay. You hear me? It's okay to be you. That's why I said when I first started this church, this is the island of the misfit toys. We all have a use. We all have purpose. We all matter to God. And yes, we're all completely screwed up and broken. And some of us will be completely screwed up and broken, but used by God. You follow what I'm saying? And it's okay. It's, you know, I don't believe in loving yourself, but I believe in coming to terms with yourself. You know what I'm saying? Where you sit back and say, you know, I'm not going to apologize for that anymore, even though I've apologized 55 times, because I have no way, unless God changes it, blah, I'm just going to be faithful in what I know. You see, there are going to be times when you're wrong and you're mistreated. People will gossip behind your back. You will get ripped off financially. You'll get passed over for promotion. You will be blamed. You'll be cheated. Friends will betray you. Tell it to Jesus. You see, we have a standard. We're supposed to be patient and wait on God. And we're not supposed to seek vengeance, but the fact is we're supposed to seek peace. And when we live like that, the world is going to sit back and say, wow, because of that in your life, you still love God? you tell me about it? You see, that's the missing element. That's the missing thing that you don't see when they portray Christians as bigots on the evening news when it comes to the justice issues that are out there. Because you see, we know that we do have an answer. And it's not because, we're not self-righteous over the fact that we have an answer. The fact is that we found an answer that has made us righteous. We have an answer that has given us hope. We have an answer and something something of justice that we can anchor our lives to. And it's created this patientness within us, this longing for what God wants, this longing. Let me tell you something. When you are on your face saying, God, why not this? For 10 years. And you're seeking God, seeking God, seeking God, seeking God. God, what about this? God, what about this? God, God, you put this on my heart. God, what about this? And you don't have any answer. And somebody walks into church on today's date and tells me, I talked to so-and-so about this. What do you think? And you sit back and say, that's something that I've been talking to God about for 20 years. And He's prepared me because I incubated it before His throne in prayer. Seeking His face, knowing that I might not get an answer, but I had to be patient. And you sit back and you say, you know what? I'll tell you a couple stories. You're going to be ripped off serving God. We had a couple, father and daughter, 10 years ago, who were coming for a while, and they seemed to be getting it. And one month he came to me and said, listen, I'm on these meds, blah, 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 and I'm short, can you help me? Took the money amongst ourselves and helped them. This went on for a couple, 3 months, and all of a sudden they stopped coming. And I tried to hunt them down, and they were avoiding me, and they were, whole 9 yards. And I ran into somebody who's a believer in another church. Oh, you know them, blah, 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 by name. I'm going, yeah. What's the deal? Oh, they move from church to church, and when they get enough money for their drugs and their medications, they move on to another church to get money out of it. I'm like, really? I was naive. I was a new senior pastor. I didn't know people were like this. Another one. We have a food ministry. We have people coming all the time. You have to ask yourself questions. When they show up driving a Lexus or a Mercedes or a Cadillac and they need food, is it bad living? Or what's the deal? Or when you're shopping at Giant and because you buy your grocery bags that you use to feed the poor from the same Giant, and sometimes they'll give you gift cards to buy the grocery bags that you need. You get on a first name basis with 2 or 3 of the managers, and they sit back and say, Charlie, do you know that people are getting name brand stuff from your pantry and they're bringing it back to get money for their name brand stuff? I said, well, like what? Well, Folgers. And by the way, I knew it was Folgers. I knew it was Folgers immediately because I was working with Phil Abundance and we scored 300 big honking coffee containers of Folgers. 300 of them. Got it for 20, 30 cents a pound. And we were giving it in the food baskets. Well, they were taking that $17 can of Folgers back and getting cash on a regular basis. Oh, he goes, also Hellmann's. He says, don't give away mayonnaise. So he said, if you give away mayonnaise, give the really cheap, awful stuff away. Well, but don't people deserve the best? No. He says, because they bring back the Hellmann's. Anything that's a high-quality name brand, people will bring back and turn in for cash, whether they have a receipt or not.
Bring out the Hellmann's, bring out the best. Bring it back to your supermarket. Brilliant.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But here's the thing. Do we stop serving the poor? No! Guy Pluto. I keep coming back to him. You're laughing. Listen, the first time I met him, he was the poster child for everything wrong with Delco. Not every 5th word, every other word was an F-bomb, okay? When he prayed, there was F-bombs, okay? But the fact is today he's reconciled to his family and he will want to pray with everybody and his language is clean. Because we've seen him come to Christ, become healed in his physical issues for the most part, and now he's reconciled back to his family, to the place where he's bringing people to get help. Listen, you don't care about getting ripped off when you know that there are people that really need it, people that are really, because you start policing it to the point of ridiculous. Okay, we learned some things. We rip labels off containers now. If you get something without a label, it's because it's name brand, and we don't want you to have the temptation of going getting cash for your heroin habit, But listen, let God be the judge. Have faith in him. Wait on him. And don't take it into your own hands. Let go, let God. That's God's justice. In a nutshell. That's us being able to understand the practical application of his justice. Because you see, when that is working in our lives, we will have something that is vibrant that other people can hear. No matter what the issue is that you come across. Let's pray. Father, we thank you today. We thank you for how you meet needs and how you work in our lives, and how, Father, there is justice. And Father, that the justice that the world is offered, the justice that the world is seeking, isn't justice. It's one more way of entrapment, one more way of bondage, one more way of causing pain and hurt. And I pray, Father, that as people, we are able to live our lives in such a way that people will be hungry for the truth, hungry for what we have. Cause us to be warriors in this regard, Father. To press in on you, rely on you, wait on you, and give it to you. And be satisfied and grateful with the answers we do get. Bless now in your Son's name. Amen.